Jiang Yu steps out of the shower and freezes in the center of the room. His gaze scans the floor, but the dark silhouette that should trail his heels is missing. He searches every corner of the apartment, yet the floor remains stubbornly clear of his own reflection. Suddenly, a figure detaches itself from the wall and stands motionless in the dim light. The young man recoils, his heart hammering against his ribs as he stares at his own duplicate. He wonders if this entity is a living threat or a harbinger of his own demise. Hesitation clouds his mind, but he decides to test the strange copy by ordering it to raise a hand. The shadow complies instantly, mirroring his intent with eerie, mechanical precision. Strange occurrences have plagued Jiang Yu for weeks, beginning with the sudden arrival of glowing health bars hovering above the heads of strangers. Visions of a ruined city filled with rampaging monsters frequently flash before his eyes, only to vanish as quickly as they appeared. A mysterious, pulsating tattoo on his chest now radiates a dark, unfamiliar power that defies explanation. This new, obedient shadow feels like the final piece of a puzzle he is not yet ready to solve. Excitement replaces his fear, and he begins to put the entity through a series of increasingly absurd commands. He watches with delight as his own shadow performs a rhythmic dance in the middle of the living room. A sharp, throbbing headache forces him to pause, leaving him to wonder about the origin of this dark manifestation. A glowing orb emerges from his chest tattoo, projecting a translucent interface into the air before him. The screen displays the stats and attributes of his shadow, revealing a singular ability labeled as Shadow Devouring. He taps a small icon to expand the details, learning that his shadow is an exact memory-laden replica of himself. The entity possesses no independent thought, acting only as a conduit for his own will. Jiang Yu reaches out, his hand passing harmlessly through the shadow to confirm its lack of physical form. He asks the shadow if it holds his memories, and the entity offers a silent, solemn nod. The young man lunges for his desk, grabbing his math homework to test the limits of this peculiar servant. He watches with genuine surprise as the shadow grips the pen with unexpected grace. The shadow fails to solve the complex equations, eventually dropping the pen in a display of intellectual paralysis. Jiang Yu sighs in frustration, boasting that he could have finished the assignment in 2 minutes flat. He decides to pivot, ordering the shadow to transcribe his lecture notes from memory instead. The entity begins to write with fluid, rapid strokes, proving that it can indeed serve as an academic shortcut. He realizes that he no longer needs to strive for superhuman status when he can simply cheat his way through every test. The potential for profit is immense, and he briefly considers selling his textbooks to clear his workspace. He returns to the attribute panel, hunting for further secrets hidden within the interface. A sub-menu reveals that he can absorb shadow points from any darkness, including inanimate objects. He searches the room for a source of shadow, eventually settling on the dark patch in the corner of his bedroom. His attempt to absorb the darkness fails, leaving him annoyed by the lack of a proper manual or guide. A sudden notification flashes before his eyes, informing him that his vision has undergone an unknown transformation. This new ability, dubbed the Shadow Pupil, allows him to perceive the dark, hidden side of the world. He wonders if this dark realm is the same apocalyptic wasteland he glimpsed in his earlier visions. He decides to remain cautious, choosing to master these powers slowly rather than rushing into danger. He turns back to his shadow, ordering it to cease its writing and begin a set of push-ups. The entity immediately sinks into the floor, vanishing from sight and leaving Jiang Yu in a state of sudden panic. He waits in silence until the shadow emerges from the ground, standing tall once more before him. He demands to know the location of the entity, and the shadow replies that it was training on the dark side. Jiang Yu contemplates the efficiency of this arrangement, wondering if the dark realm offers a superior environment for growth. He dismisses the shadow, granting it permission to return to its hidden dimension. The young man sits at his table, preparing to tackle his work with renewed focus and energy. The next morning, he wakes up on his desk, his body stiff and his mind filled with lingering dreams of food. A sharp pain shoots through his back, a result of his uncomfortable sleeping position. A rhythmic knocking at the door interrupts his thoughts, signaling an early visitor. He opens the door to find his girlfriend and classmate Liu Yao Yao standing in the hallway. He notices her health bar hovering at 93, noting a slight drop since their last meeting. He suspects that the residual pollution from his shadow's return might be affecting the air quality. She asks why he is awake so early, revealing that she came to see his latest collection of drawings. He slams the door shut in his haste, leaving her startled and visibly annoyed in the hallway. He stares at the wall, shocked to see deep, jagged cracks spiderwebbing across the surface where he leaned. The realization hits him that his physical strength has increased to a dangerous, uncontrollable degree. Liu Yaoyao enters the room, her eyes widening as she surveys his physique with clinical curiosity. She asks if he has been training at the gym, then immediately dismisses her own theory, knowing him to be a lazy loner. She begins to prod his muscles, demanding to know the secret behind his overnight transformation. He deflects, claiming that he has been lifting his bookshelves every single day. He understands that the strength his shadow gained in the dark realm is being mirrored in his own body. The girl remains skeptical, suspecting that he has been using illegal performance-enhancing drugs. She warns him that there is still time to stop before he ruins his health permanently. He mocks her concern, calling her talkative, but she reacts by grabbing his arm with surprising speed. She reaches into her pocket, pulling out a strange, metallic device. He recoils, fearing she has produced a lethal weapon intended to neutralize him. She explains that the device is a pollution index tester, used to identify those corrupted by alien forces or dark resentment. She notes that failure to purify such pollution leads to a grotesque, abnormal transformation. Zhang Yu laughs internally, confident that the power on his chest is far too sophisticated to be labeled as simple pollution. His amusement turns to cold shock when the device begins to whine and vibrate in reaction to his presence. He glances back to see her holding a firearm, her finger resting steadily on the trigger. He forces his heart rate to slow, pouring his willpower into suppressing the reaction from his chest. The machine settles, the reading returning to normal as the threat of discovery fades. He exhales a long, shaky breath, feeling the tension drain from his limbs as he realizes he is safe. She mentions that her father raised her to be vigilant, a lesson that nearly cost him his life. He quickly steers the conversation toward his comic drawings, hoping to distract her from further scrutiny. Yao Yao brightens at the mention of the artwork, her suspicion replaced by eager anticipation. Later, he reflects on how close he came to being exposed as something other than human. He opens the system window, reading a string of notifications about his shadow's progress in the dark realm. The shadow has been training relentlessly, accumulating points and growing stronger by the hour. He is stunned by the efficiency of this automated growth, realizing he has been training while he slept. He decides to push the entity further, assigning it a grueling regimen of push-ups and planks. He demands the shadow perform one-handed finger push-ups and rigorous tiger pose exercises. He integrates martial arts routines, weight-bearing runs, and intensive abdominal work into the schedule. Outside his door, Yao Yao listens to the sounds of his training and sighs in relief, convinced he is just a dedicated athlete. She leaves satisfied, her doubts silenced by the mundane explanation of his hard work. The date marks the first day of the 99th year of the disaster calendar. The shadow continues its tireless training, never pausing to rest or catch its breath. Zhang Yu feels his own muscles hardening, the benefits of the shadow's labor bleeding into his reality. He considers it a personal failure to be content with his current limited status in life. The next day, he intensifies the training, marveling at the sheer speed of his physical evolution. He wonders if he could defeat Yao Yao with a single strike, though he quickly reminds himself that he needs more power. His uncle Li, a veteran of the night patrol, pays him a visit but fails to notice the subtle changes in his nephew. The man is aging, his body marked by the loss of an arm during his long years of service. Zhang Yu calculates that he could easily overcome 3 men like his uncle or 10 like his girlfriend with his current strength. He resolves to work even harder, refusing to let his life stagnate in the face of such opportunity. Each day brings a new routine of relentless labor for the shadow and quiet study for the boy. He pushes himself to perform 10 push-ups, but he finds the effort tedious compared to his shadow's performance. He realizes that the growth rate of shadow points is frustratingly slow when he relies on his own body. He stares into the darkness of his room, searching for a way to accelerate his path to total invincibility. 8 shadow points sat in his tally, a meager sum that left him calculating the time required to trigger the forbidden shadow possession. He hypothesized that his growth would accelerate drastically if he dared to step directly into the dark side himself. A swirling vortex of midnight ink emerged from the floorboards, wrapping around his ankles and pulling him downward into the abyss. He vanished from his bedroom, expecting to find a realm of monsters, but instead found himself standing in the exact same room. He frowned at the familiar furniture, wondering if this was truly the dark side or merely a phantom projection of his own home. Stepping out into the hallway, he realized that his room remained a safe haven, disconnected from the true, dangerous expanse of this shadow layer. He pushed open the front door, stepping out into a world that mirrored the real one with haunting, monochromatic precision. The dark side appeared identical to the world he knew, a deception that ignited a flicker of annoyance in his chest. He paced the silent streets, his ears straining for any sign of life, until a sudden, sharp sound erupted from the shadows behind him. He whirled around, hoping for a guide or a fellow traveler, but his eyes locked onto a grotesque creature with glowing, blood-red eyes. The beast lunged with lethal intent, forcing him to rely on his honed instincts as he narrowly dodged the first savage strike. The monster pressed its assault, its movements fluid and predatory, while he danced through the air, barely avoiding the reach of its claws. He realized he could not defeat this phantom with his current strength, so he quickly commanded his shadow circle to materialize. He leaped into the swirling aperture, feeling the sensation of reality shifting as he tumbled back into his own bedroom. His heart hammered against his ribs, the sheer terror of the encounter leaving him gasping for air on the cold floor. He failed to understand why a creature would manifest from thin air to hunt him, yet he felt a grim determination take root. His grueling training had granted him the flexibility and speed to survive, and he vowed to return to that place to claim his revenge. On the 28th of January, he stepped once more into the dark side, ready to face the red-eyed monster head-on. The creature struck with newfound ferocity, catching him off guard and leaving a jagged wound across his skin. He returned the following day, desperate to balance the scales, but the monster proved too fast for his current level of martial prowess. A heavy blow landed squarely on his chest, knocking the breath from his lungs and forcing him to retreat in defeat. By the 30th of January, he had suffered 3 direct hits, losing 6% of his vitality to the relentless entity. He decided to take a day of recovery, nursing his battered body while Yao Yao arrived to tend to his fresh scars. She studied the angry welts on his skin, demanding to know the identity of the person who had dared to fight him. He dismissed her concern with a smirk, calling the injuries medals of honor earned through his secret, intense training. Yama scoffed at his arrogance, warning him that his newfound physical strength would eventually lead to a dangerous hubris. He brushed off her lecture, shifting the focus of the conversation toward the upcoming state-mandated martial arts examination. With the test only a month away, he felt the pressure mounting and wondered if she had prepared for the rigorous selection process. She seemed to have forgotten the deadline entirely, a fact that troubled him given the current state of their crumbling society. In this era of disaster, the arts and cultural industries had collapsed, leaving poets and painters at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. The public had lost all interest in entertainment, turning their gaze instead toward national security and the deeds of the night guards. These night guards had become the celebrities of the age, and any young citizen aspiring to that glory had to pass the state exam. Yao Yao confessed that she possessed no desire to join the night patrol, harboring a secret dream of studying music instead. He encouraged her to follow her passion, though he doubted her father would ever grant permission for such an impractical path. Her father held a senior position within the night patrol department, a role that carried the weight of a high-ranking official. Yao Yao remained indifferent to her father's status, fearing instead the new government mandate that forced every young adult to register for the exam. He was not surprised by the news, knowing that the authorities rarely cared for the individual desires of the common student. They had lowered the bar, allowing even those with mediocre qualifications to apply for the general examination to bolster the ranks. Yao Yao noted that the burden on the night patrol had grown unbearable, making her participation in the test almost inevitable. He recalled the instrument she had brought to a previous trial, remembering how difficult it had been for him to remain unnoticed during the chaos. He hoped his own modest guide would keep him out of the death trap camps, though he knew luck was a fickle ally. He asked if the reagent she carried could protect him from the alien species, but she shook her head in disappointment. She explained that the tool served only as a detector for supernatural beings, offering no defense against the truly monstrous entities. She advised him to run for his life and sound the emergency alarm if he ever encountered a high-level alien threat. He wanted to press her for more details on these dangerous species, but she abruptly steered the conversation toward his healing wounds. She packed her things to leave, promising to return soon while he sat in silence, contemplating the vast gaps in his knowledge. He cleared his throat, asking if he could access the archives of paranormal information held by her family. She eyed him with suspicion, wondering if he intended to pursue a career in the public service after all. He admitted that he wanted to be prepared for the mandatory test, while also hiding his secret plan to produce a comic about superhumans. The prospect of a comic featuring alien blood and superhuman feats lit a spark of genuine excitement in her eyes. He described his protagonist, a skinny boy named Ben, who possessed a kind heart despite the constant torment of his school bullies. He explained how Ben was selected for the Super Warrior Project, relying on his sheer willpower to survive the grueling transformation process. Ben became the legendary Captain Ben, a hero who received injections of experimental serum to unlock his hidden, explosive potential. The narrative took a dark turn as he described how the night patrol kept the captain away from the front lines of the battlefield. Instead, they paraded him before wealthy families and noble ladies, using his image as a political tool rather than a weapon of war. Yama listened with rapt attention, her excitement growing as he wove the intricate plot of his unconventional hero. They walked to her home on the same street, entering her room where she left him to search for her father's classified materials. His eyes wandered the room, catching sight of a comic book focused on sibling love that seemed out of place among her things. She returned to tell him that the book belonged to a friend, warning him firmly not to touch her personal belongings. He watched her leave, marveling at how little she had changed, still clinging to the musical instruments of her childhood. He remembered how she used to force him to listen to her music, even when he had no interest in the melodies she played. He pressed play on one of her old tapes, the notes stirring a wave of nostalgia for the days before the disaster. Yao Yao returned to find him listening to the music, teasing him for finally developing a taste for the arts. He brushed off her comments, his attention caught by a VR device lying on the desk, which he quickly strapped to his face. The world dissolved into an abyss, a virtual reality so vivid that he felt as if he were standing on the edge of a cosmic nightmare. He saw the source of the world's disasters, a place where alien species were born in a cycle of endless killing and destruction. He realized with a jolt that these were the same creatures he had. Between the real world and the abyss lay the shadow layer, a dark reflection that served as an infiltration point for the monsters. Before the cracks in the abyss had fully opened, these creatures had already been slipping through the shadow layer to poison the world. The night guards struggled to control the flow, yet many entities still slipped through the net to wreak havoc on the unsuspecting population. Every 2 months, the shadow layer reset itself, a process that caused the number of alien species to surge uncontrollably. He learned that humans above the 4th level were discouraged from entering as the shadow layer significantly hindered their combat effectiveness. The visible range within the layer was limited to a few meters, a distance that only expanded as a warrior grew in power. The environment was saturated with pollution, and prolonged exposure could twist a human into a grotesque, unrecognizable entity. He wondered why he had felt no discomfort during his own brief foray, sensing that his unique shadow power offered a layer of protection. He watched the alien creatures crawl through the VR simulation, his anxiety rising as he grasped the scale of the threat. To stand against such horrors, he needed a force that could rival the strength of the abyss itself. He understood that he had to become extraordinary, shedding his mundane life for the burden of a warrior. A mysterious figure appeared in the distance of the simulation, and he wondered if this was the pinnacle of human potential. He questioned whether passing the martial arts exam would truly set him on the path to becoming such a powerful protector. These extraordinary beings were essentially humans merged with alien traits, their lives dedicated to the endless fight against pollution. He learned that upon death, these warriors risked a horrific transformation into the very monsters they had spent their lives hunting. They were forced to exhaust their power completely before their final breath to avoid becoming the next source of disaster. Overwhelmed by the weight of this information, he tore the VR device from his head and stared at the ceiling. He told Yao Yao that the data was extensive but clearly outdated, hiding his true realization behind a mask of casual indifference. He requested a back massage to soothe his tension, and she reacted with a sharp, indignant refusal. He bribed her with 3 original, ultra-high-definition drawings, a trade she accepted with a reluctant nod. As she worked on his shoulders, she noted that his muscles felt hard and dense, far beyond the physique of a normal boy. He claimed his neck had grown muscular from his training, successfully distracting her from the deeper mystery of his transformation. She asked if his abs were equally developed, and he allowed her to feel his torso, a moment of vulnerability that shifted the atmosphere. Her father walked into the room at that precise moment, his eyes widening as he witnessed the intimate scene. They gathered for dinner, the air thick with the suffocating tension radiating from Uncle Lu toward the young man. Yao Yao stammered that her father had misunderstood the situation, but the older man refused to accept her desperate excuse. She turned to Zhang Yu, urging him to say something to break the mounting, awkward silence. He hesitated, feeling the weight of the veteran's gaze, before finally admitting that the entire situation was his fault. He took full responsibility, challenging Uncle Lu to take whatever action he deemed necessary to settle the score. Uncle Lu's face twisted into a mask of pure rage as he scanned the room for a weapon. The frantic young woman lunged toward her father, desperate to soothe his sudden, violent outburst. The young man scrambled backward, stammering that the entire scene was a total misunderstanding of the facts. He recalled their shared history, remembering how she had always been the studious one while he played the role of the neighborhood troublemaker. He mused on why she had stuck by his side for so long, wondering if his past act of saving her from bullies had earned him her lifelong loyalty. He suspected she simply romanticized his reckless nature, viewing his penchant for pranks as a form of misunderstood bravery. He remembered her laughing as she joined him in his elaborate schemes, even when those pranks forced him to pose as a destitute orphan. Uncle Lu had never trusted him, and the veteran's gaze remained heavy with suspicion as he finally retreated to the sofa. The older man lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around his face as he demanded an explanation for the intimate scene he had just interrupted. The young man claimed he was merely seeking knowledge about the hidden world of aliens and supernatural threats. Uncle Lu scoffed at the answer, dismissing the young man as a spoiled child who had no idea what he was asking for. He asked the boy if he truly understood why the government strictly controlled access to such dangerous information. The young man admitted his ignorance, prompting the veteran to explain the fragile nature of the human soul. He warned that the human heart was inherently unstable, and that deep despair could easily drag a person into the hungry maw of the abyss. He explained that some truths were far too heavy for the average person to carry without shattering. Even a hairline fracture in one's willpower could provide an opening for alien entities to seize control of a human life. The government mandated rigorous testing to ensure that only the physically and mentally resilient could ever touch the supernatural realm. He cautioned that the path to true power was a grueling marathon, littered with the broken lives of those who lacked the necessary discipline. Every year, countless recruits lost their minds or their lives when they failed to master the volatile energies flowing through them. The veteran expressed a weary sadness, advising the young man to stay far away from the darkness for as long as he possibly could. The young man offered his sincere thanks, yet he stood his ground, noting that the military comprehensive examination left him no choice but to prepare. He argued that relying on his own strength was the only logical choice in a world that felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. Before the veteran could offer a rebuttal, his radio crackled to life with an urgent mission directive. Uncle Lu rose to leave, pausing only to order the boy to behave like a gentleman. He issued a final, chilling threat, promising to end the young man's life if he ever crossed the line with his daughter again. The young man promised to keep his distance, though his words only served to annoy the young woman, who felt insulted by the implication that they had ever done anything inappropriate. The scene shifted to the following day, where the city streets bustled with the mundane rhythms of daily life. The young man stood before a public digital display, his eyes narrowing as he read the names of the Sunset Watch members tasked with guarding the sea of clouds. He felt a sharp pang of disappointment, realizing that the information he had scavenged was far too superficial to be of any real use. He picked up his groceries, lamenting the fact that Uncle Lu would likely tighten the security around such data from now on. A sudden call from the young woman interrupted his thoughts, her voice bright as she requested he bring home some milk and eggs. He teased her in response, suggesting that she should be more specific if she also required feminine hygiene products. He grabbed the requested items and stepped back out into the cool air, his mind racing with plans for his upcoming training. He contemplated the effects of his shadow exercises, concluding that he would need to supplement his routine with more rigorous physical trials. He had seen the advertisements for alien combat training everywhere, and he knew the competition for the martial arts exam would be fiercer than ever this year. He cast his gaze toward the darkening horizon, sensing a profound and terrible shift in the atmosphere of the world. He pushed the encroaching dread aside, deciding that his only path forward was to evolve through the heat of battle. He checked his surroundings to ensure no prying eyes were watching, then slipped into the shadows. He crossed into the dark side, his senses immediately sharpening as he detected a human presence nearby. He spotted a young boy from his own street, the lad's health bar flickering at a mere 14%. The boy lay broken on the ground, his body battered and his life force fading rapidly into the gloom. The young man rushed forward, but before he could speak, the victim collapsed, his strength finally failing him. A monstrous creature emerged from the shadows behind the fallen boy, its form shifting and predatory. The young man recognized the beast as the very same entity he had been hunting for his own personal vendetta. He noticed a small boy and a young girl huddled in the corner, cowering in terror as they tried to hide from the monster. The sight of the children ignited a cold, focused fury in his chest as he realized the monster was the source of the young guard's demise. The narrative rewound to show how the injured guard had arrived in this nightmare realm. The young man had been a night guard, exhausted from an endless shift and the crushing weight of his professional duties. He regretted the day he had decided to pursue the martial arts path, wishing he had never learned the truth about the world's hidden burdens. He had heard a sudden, desperate cry for help, and his instincts had forced him to investigate. He watched in horror as two children were dragged toward a swirling rift in space that defied all known logic. He wondered if an alien species had developed a new way to abduct civilians, as he had never heard of humans being pulled directly into the dark side. The children screamed for mercy as the vortex swallowed them, and the guard had sprinted forward to save them. He grabbed their small hands, but the darkness surged, dragging all three of them into the abyss. They landed on the far side of the rift, the children sobbing as they stared into the alien landscape. The guard finally realized he was trapped in the dark side, completely off duty and stripped of his weapons and pollution control gear. He realized he was likely walking into his own grave, but he refused to abandon the children to the monsters roaming the wasteland. A creature lunged from the shadows, and the guard struck out, forcing the monster to recoil and vanish into the mist. He realized there was no escape, and the surrounding area was crawling with hostile life forms. Years of mundane administrative work had dulled the combat skills he had once honed at the university. He looked at the two frightened children, knowing their survival now rested entirely on his aging, tired shoulders. He triggered a distress signal from his wristband, then ripped the device off his arm. He pressed the unit into the hands of the little boy, knowing the machine could at least provide a temporary shield against the toxic pollution. He lied to the children, assuring them that they would survive this ordeal if they just found a place to hide. He remembered his own youth when he had passed the military strength exam at 18 and entered the prestigious university. He recalled the long, hard nights he had spent building his foundations, dreaming of becoming a legendary fighter. He remembered the pride he felt when he defeated an unclassified alien during his second year of studies. He realized with a bitter sting that all that effort had been useless against the crushing reality of his own lack of natural talent. He had worked until his bones ached, yet he could never bridge the gap between himself and the true elites. He had been forced to drop out of the military program and settle for a life as a low-level employee of the Night's Watch. The monster returned, its four-dimensional form vibrating with a predatory hum as it closed the distance. The guard countered the first strike, but his reflexes were sluggish, his brain unable to keep pace with the creature's speed. The monster feinted and landed a brutal blow, sending the guard reeling backward. His body felt heavy, as if thousands of rusted needles were piercing his muscles with every movement. He knew he had to finish the fight quickly, or the encroaching pollution would finish him instead. He gathered his remaining willpower and unleashed a blinding shadow technique, forcing the creature to collapse in pain. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, a grim sign that his own powers were poisoning him from the inside out. He had always lacked the willpower to use supernatural abilities repeatedly, and every activation pushed him closer to death. The monster recovered, its eyes fixed on his throat as it prepared to deliver a final, killing blow. The guard braced himself, determined to fight until his very last breath, even if he knew he was outmatched. The creature slammed into him with the force of a falling boulder, crushing his ribs and pinning him to the desolate ground. He coughed up a spray of crimson, marveling at how quickly the beast had learned to exploit his fading strength. He knew this was an average-class species, the kind any decent university student could have dispatched without breaking a sweat. He wondered if his entire life had been a failure, a long string of struggles defined by his own limitations. He refused to surrender, resolving to hold the creature back for just a few more seconds to buy time for a rescue. As the monster prepared for the final strike, the guard felt his consciousness slipping into the dark. The injured guard stared at the encroaching shadows, his heart heavy with the weight of a life defined by loss and professional mediocrity. He remembered the day at age 15 when his relatives perished at the hands of the alien species, a tragedy that had fueled his decision to join the military at 18. The memories of his 20th year lingered, marking the moment he departed the combat department after finishing his second year of rigorous training. He had transitioned into the night police as a trainee at 21, eventually securing a position as a regular employee. 4 years had passed since he first donned the uniform, yet he still perceived his existence as entirely ordinary within this fractured world. Despite the persistent conflict between humanity and the alien species, he knew the public advertisements of peace were nothing more than a calculated lie. He felt the familiar urge to escape this harsh reality, but the oppressive presence of the dark clouds made denial impossible. The young man acknowledged that death remained the standard outcome for those burdened with the volatile gift of superpowers. He refused to succumb to despair, however, knowing the safety of the 2 children rested solely upon his resolve. He consumed a blue pill, feeling a sudden, artificial surge of vitality course through his battered frame. With newfound momentum, he stood and prepared himself for a desperate second round against the encroaching monster. The guard took the initiative, launching a relentless barrage of attacks that forced the creature to recoil. The alien struggled to maintain its defense against the continuous, desperate strikes of the human fighter. He clung to a fragile hope, believing he could finally terminate the creature if he managed to hold his ground for a few moments longer. His stamina failed as the toxic pollution surged through his system, allowing the monster to seize the opening and deliver a crushing blow. He collapsed to the desolate ground, blood streaming from a deep wound on his forehead as he sensed his end drawing near. The realization washed over him that his limited abilities were insufficient to overcome the monstrous entity. He felt the crushing weight of helplessness, mourning the fact that even the potency of the pills could not secure a victory. He watched the edges of his vision dim, fearing his mundane and unremarkable life was finally drawing to a close. Just as he prepared to surrender, a voice cut through the silence of the dark side. He wondered if a member of the Night's Watch had arrived, but the voice sounded far too youthful to belong to a seasoned officer. The stranger did not match the profile of a professional guard, leaving the wounded man confused by the presence of a civilian in such a lethal zone. The newcomer, named Zhang, approached the fallen man and placed a steadying hand upon his shoulders. Zhang instructed him to remain still and recover his strength, promising to handle the remaining threat himself. The guard marveled at Zhang's presence, knowing that entry into the dark side was strictly controlled by the inspection department. He speculated that Zhang might be a mysterious outlier, a man living in the shadows of the Forbidden Realm. The alien lunged toward the new arrival, forcing Zhang to slide across the ground to avoid the lethal reach of its claws. The guard realized with a pang of guilt that he was far too weak to contribute to the battle. When the creature attempted to strike the guard once more, Zhang intercepted the beast with a swift, calculated movement. A digital interface flickered in the air, indicating that Zhang's precise strike had reduced the monster's HP from 24 to 23. Zhang warned the creature that its opponent was no longer the wounded guard, but a new adversary entirely. He readied himself for the next exchange, gripping a glass bottle he had scavenged from the debris. He shattered the bottle against the floor, using the jagged remnants as a makeshift weapon to intimidate the monster. His previous experiences in battle allowed him to predict the creature's movements with surprising accuracy. The alien appeared seriously injured, its speed and raw strength visibly diminished after the earlier skirmishes. Zhang recognized the shift in the creature's power, sensing that the advantage had finally tilted in his favor. The monster roared in frustration, launching another desperate attack toward the young man. Zhang dodged the strike with practiced ease, leaving the guard to wonder if his savior possessed hidden depths or was simply lucky. He observed that while Zhang lacked conventional techniques, he maintained an exceptional ability to suppress his enemies. Zhang stood firm, driven by a singular, burning need to exact revenge upon the creature that had terrorized them. He channeled his remaining energy into a heavy strike aimed directly at the creature's exposed waist. The alien countered with a brutal swipe, throwing Zhang backward across the rocky terrain. Zhang realized that attacking the waist forced the creature into a defensive posture, a vital piece of information for the fight. He watched the monster charge toward him, calculating that his own body could withstand only 2 more hits before failing. He considered retreating from the dark side to recover, but the lives of the children and the guard anchored him to the spot. A system notification caught his eye, showing the alien's HP had dropped to 20%. He convinced himself that at such low health he had nothing left to fear and possessed the strength to finish the fight. The guard shouted a warning, advising Zhang to target the alien's right rib as it was already compromised. Zhang acknowledged the instruction and sprinted toward the monster, drawing its attention instantly. The alien shifted to protect its right side, only to be shocked when Zhang pivoted and struck its left flank instead. The creature's HP plummeted to 18% as it reeled from the unexpected maneuver. The monster attempted to flee, prompting Zhang to wonder if the beast possessed enough intelligence to prioritize its own survival. The guard urged him to act quickly, realizing the alien had set its sights on the frightened children. The creature loomed over the youngsters, opening its maw in preparation for a final, gruesome meal. The children screamed for help, their voices echoing through the desolate alien landscape. Zhang grabbed a discarded soda can and hurled it with every ounce of his remaining strength. The metal container struck the alien square in the face, momentarily stunning the beast. The guard pushed through his pain, leaping into the air to deliver a final, desperate strike to the creature's head. The impact reduced the monster's HP to 15%, causing it to stumble backward. The guard coughed up a fresh spray of blood, watching helplessly as the monster prepared to strike him down. Zhang lunged forward, grabbing the creature from behind to prevent the killing blow. He sank his teeth into the monster's neck, a primal display of aggression that further depleted its health. He pulled on the creature's hair, taunting it to continue its useless struggle as the HP dropped to 11%. Zhang swore he would never allow the beast to harm another human being. A strange, ball-like structure suddenly emerged from the center of the monster's chest. Zhang felt a moment of confusion before the realization struck him that the sphere was the creature's core. He struck the glowing ball with all his remaining force, triggering a massive, blinding explosion. The alien disintegrated, its physical form vanishing along with the oppressive dark energy that had birthed the chaos. Zhang stood amidst the silence, his body bleeding, but his heart filled with a profound sense of relief. He glanced over to see the guard sitting on the ground, leaning against the children while struggling to remain conscious. Zhang savored the victory, knowing that his long-awaited revenge had finally been achieved. His vision suddenly blurred, and the world faded into an all-encompassing, terrifying darkness. He found himself standing in a nightmarish version of reality, surrounded by a landscape of carnage and burning wreckage. Hundreds of alien entities swarmed the area, their eyes fixed hungrily upon him. He shouted into the void, declaring that the sun was high even in the dark side of the world. Clamors of light and shouts from the shadows filled the air, painting a picture of a world locked in eternal, brutal war. He saw people falling in the crossfire, some oblivious to the true nature of the great death that loomed over them. His vision snapped back to the present, and he heard the guard's voice asking if he was still alive. Zhang confirmed his survival, feeling a wave of relief as he realized the horrific scene had been nothing more than a vision. He reached out to touch the creature's remains, identifying it as a rare, shade-eating alien. The guard expressed concern for Zhang's silence, unaware of the internal battle he had just fought. Zhang assessed the guard's condition, noting that he held 10% of his HP remaining. According to the standards of the system, a human at 10% health stood on the precipice of death with only a slim chance of recovery. The guard requested assistance, and Zhang helped him lean back against the cold stone of the wall. The guard asked if Zhang was a member of the Night Watch, showing genuine surprise that a resident of the same building remained a stranger. Zhang denied any affiliation with the Night Patrol, keeping his personal background obscured. The guard laughed weakly, noting that the way Zhang fought suggested he was far too skilled to be a mere patrolman. He joked that not all members of the Night Watch possessed such impressive combat prowess. Zhang wondered how the man could maintain such a jovial mood while standing on the brink of total collapse. The guard inquired about Zhang's age and university, prompting Zhang to fabricate a story about studying at North Metro Academy. He lied to protect his privacy, unwilling to share his true history with a man he barely knew. The guard revealed that he attended the same university, leading to an awkward exchange about their respective departments. Zhang remained evasive, and the guard eventually dropped the subject, assuming Zhang belonged to the martial arts department. He continued to chatter, asking for a cigarette to soothe his nerves. Zhang offered a biscuit instead, prompting the guard to mock him for his perceived stinginess. Zhang explained that his supplies had been scattered during the intense struggle against the monster. He offered to retrieve the fallen food, but the guard refused, declaring he had no interest in eating off the floor. After a few minutes of silence, the guard asked if this had been Zhang's first time fighting an alien solo. Zhang confirmed that it was indeed his first experience facing such a threat alone. The guard confessed his envy for those in the martial arts and combat departments, lamenting his own poor qualifications and weak willpower. He viewed himself as a hopeless case, unable to increase his power despite his desperate efforts. Zhang gestured toward the pill in the man's hand, noting that it served to increase his combat effectiveness during the struggle. He advised the dying man to stop speaking and conserve his remaining energy while they waited for the rescue team to arrive. The injured guard shook his head, admitting that he simply craved the company of another person in his final moments. He lamented that the willpower of ordinary civilians remained tragically low, leaving them unable to resist the encroaching pollution for long. Zhang questioned whether the man harbored deep regrets about choosing the path of a martial artist. The guard clenched his fist tightly, confessing that he regretted the decision with every fiber of his being. He explained that he had been a simple clerical worker who spent his days fishing for excuses and chatting with girls. His only real contribution had been training the new night patrolman, a duty that felt entirely insignificant in the grand scheme. He felt as though he had been pulled into a violent whirlpool, leaving him with no possible way to escape his fate. The man coughed violently, and Zhang urged him to be gentle with himself, warning that such exertion would only hasten his end. The guard insisted that he had sent the rescue signal long ago and expected the team to have arrived by now. He expressed a lingering worry for the children who lay motionless on the cold ground nearby. Zhang rose to his feet, but the guard warned him that other alien species lurked in the darkness, ready to strike. He cautioned that the protagonist could not rely on his current skills to dodge every single threat that emerged from the shadows. He begged Zhang to sit back down and continue their conversation until the authorities finally arrived. Zhang thought to himself that the man possessed a unique talent for torturing others with his persistence rather than his combat ability. He remained seated, listening as the man regaled him with embellished stories of his supposed bravery and fearlessness in the past. The man wore a faint smile, asking Zhang to apologize to the head of the Supernatural Technologies Department if he ever returned to university. He wanted to express his regret for failing to meet her high expectations, as he had proven unable to kill even a first-class monster. He also requested that Zhang thank Deputy Director Huang from the Academy of Supernatural Literature for her previous guidance. He admitted that her advice regarding humility now felt deeply embarrassing, especially given her constant rhetoric about the survival of the human race. Zhang jokingly suggested that the man wait until he could find a notebook or return later to explain all his requests in person. The guard sighed, stating that he had kept these thoughts buried for too long and simply needed a sympathetic ear. He mentioned that it would have been a dream to visit the Northern Watch Academy one last time before his journey concluded. He asked if Zhang held any more of those cookies, noting that he had developed a strange fondness for them. Zhang replied that the man possessed odd tastes, adding that spicy, stick-flavored cookies were impossible to find in the current world. The man simply smiled, telling Zhang to forget the request as the energy in the air began to thicken significantly. He announced that the night patrol had finally arrived, bringing a sense of relief to the quiet, debris-filled alleyway. Zhang felt a wave of calm wash over him, knowing that professional help was finally present to assist the fading man. He gathered his belongings and prepared to depart, but the guard asked if he wanted to travel back with the rescue team. Zhang declined the offer, insisting that he would make his way back to safety on his own terms. The man smiled warmly and wished him a safe journey, and Zhang offered his thanks before walking away into the distance. As he reached the edge of the scene, he glanced back to see the night patrol officers approaching the wounded man. The officers reported the discovery of a night patrol member and 2 children, immediately checking his vital signs. The man's health remained at a critical 10%, prompting one officer to look at his colleague and shake his head in despair. Guang noticed the man's health bar dropping rapidly toward 0 and wondered why modern medicine could not save him. As he prepared to teleport away, he stopped to salute the man, but his hand reached out into empty air as the life force finally extinguished. Despite the tragic conclusion, a peaceful smile remained etched onto the man's face as he passed away. Zhang called out for them to wait, but the activation of his return ability pulled him away to the city streets. Bystanders gathered around the area, confused by the sudden disappearance and speculating that the entire event might have been a staged performance. A large screen flickered to life, broadcasting a formal message from the night patrol to all special individuals. The broadcast reminded them that they must never surrender, even in their final and most desperate moments. It explained that if survival chances appeared slim, they were expected to use specific pills with full knowledge of the lethal risks. The broadcast revealed that the chance of death after consuming the pill stood at 90%, with a permanent reduction in lifespan for survivors. This substance, known as compound number 3, was the very same pill the guard had used to defeat the monster and save the children. The message urged the public to remember those who had fallen and to keep moving forward until every threat was eliminated. The patrol stood as the guardians of the skies and earth, protecting humanity while hoping for the arrival of a better future. They were tasked with facing the unknown and fighting against the unexplainable horrors that threatened their existence. Later, Zhang rode the elevator up to his apartment, still wearing his blood-stained clothes while contemplating the man's death. He reflected on how the guard had spent his final moments joking, yet ultimately only wanted someone to talk to before he vanished. No flowers or applause awaited him, and he disappeared from the world just as quietly as an ordinary person. Zhang resolved that it did not matter how mundane the man seemed, he would ensure his memory lived on. Exhausted, he decided to take a quick shower and collapse into his bed to escape the weight of the day. He caught his reflection in the mirror and noticed his own health bar sat at 55%, yet he could barely stand. He felt surprised, as he had assumed his health was much lower based on his physical exhaustion. He recalled the guard holding on at 10% and realized that training the physical body was not enough to survive. Willpower, he concluded, remained just as essential as the strength of one's muscles or the sharpness of one's blade. A loud voice interrupted his internal monologue as his girlfriend lounged on the sofa, questioning him about the eggs. She explained that the phones were down and she could not find anyone, so she demanded to know if he had completed her errand. Zhang turned his back, attempting to conceal the bloodstains on his clothes, while mentioning that the upcoming new year caused massive store lines. He asked how she managed to gain entry to his home, and she revealed that Uncle Lee had given her a key to check on him. She noticed the state of his clothing and asked if he had been involved in another violent fight. Zhang insisted it was late and suggested she return home before Uncle Lee arrived and drew the wrong conclusions. She refused to be dismissed, grabbing his arm and forcing him to face her directly. He tried to brush off her concern, claiming he was simply hungry and intended to make some instant noodles. Through the jagged holes in his tattered clothes, she spotted the deep wounds on his skin and let out a sharp gasp. She demanded to know how he had managed to get hurt so severely during his trip to the store. Zhang acted nervous and awkwardly explained that he had stumbled upon a robbery and intervened to stop the perpetrator. He claimed he had beaten the attacker so badly that the man was barely recognizable as a human being. His girlfriend remained skeptical of his story, prompting him to demonstrate his insane reaction speed through a series of shadowboxing movements. He continued to make excuses, swearing that he had delivered such a beating that even the attacker's own mother would fail to identify him. As he spoke, Yao Yao reached out and gently touched the marks on his face, causing him to lose his composure. He realized with a sinking heart that there was no way she would ever believe his clumsy attempt at a cover story. Yao Yao asked if he was in pain, but Zhang only sighed, expressing his desperate desire to finally get some sleep. She insisted they report the incident to Uncle Lee, but Zhang made excuses about his righteous actions to avoid further scrutiny. Too exhausted to maintain the charade, Zhang sank to the floor and admitted that he lacked the strength to even stand. Yao Yao frowned, stating that he required immediate medical attention at a hospital, but he waved off her suggestion. He assured her that he possessed better medicine at home than anything a professional facility could provide. She raised an eyebrow, teasingly asking if he simply wanted her to apply the medicine for him. With a smirk, he addressed her as Dr. Liu and requested that she patch up his various wounds. The moment she touched his skin, he screamed in agony, begging her to provide medicine rather than wrapping him like a mummy. Annoyed by his antics, she smacked his shoulder and asked if he intended to repeat such reckless behavior in the future. He promised it would not happen again, though he pointedly refused to swear on his life. Yama clenched her fist in a threat, but Zhang laughed nervously, muttering that fighting was simply a part of human nature. He told her that if it caused her so much worry, he would simply observe from the sidelines next time without intervening. She prepared to punch him in frustration, demanding to know if he really meant that he would stand by and watch. He repeated his promise to avoid trouble, but she turned to leave, clearly unconvinced by his hollow vows. As she walked toward the exit, Zhang called after her, suggesting she stay the night since he had a large bed. She stuck her tongue out at him and slammed the door, leaving him alone in the quiet apartment. Lying down to rest, he found his thoughts drifting back to the man he had met in the shadow world. The man's final request to guard the Northern Watch Academy echoed in his mind, leaving him lost in contemplation. After a long silence, Yang sat up in shock, realizing that he had never even asked the man for his name. The system pinged, notifying him that the creature he had killed in the shadow world was a first-level ghost species. The entity originated from the lower abyss and held a deep, dangerous connection to the essence of shadows. The system warned that anyone marked by this being would remain vulnerable to hidden attacks in the future. Zhang had managed to secure the kill despite suffering an arm fracture during the brutal encounter. He received a notification for shadow points and wondered if his kills were recorded automatically or if he needed to absorb them. He noticed a new system window detailing his recently acquired skill, which began to list the mechanics of the shadow assault. Zhang stood in the center of his quiet apartment, staring at the glowing system interface that detailed his new, lethal capabilities. He focused his attention on the shadow assault skill, noting that its first strike promised to bypass all conventional detection methods. Curiosity piqued, the young man spoke the name of the skill aloud into the empty room, but the air remained perfectly still. He frowned, wondering if the system remained glitched or if the skill simply required a living target to function. With a shrug, the determined hunter decided to postpone his testing and turned his attention to his updated character statistics. The screen confirmed his name as Zhang, his primary attribute as Shadow, and his current balance of 14 shadow points. He observed that his class had officially evolved into a rogue, a specialized role designed for precision strikes from the darkness. His active abilities now included Shadow Devour, Shadow Eyes, and the newly acquired Shadow Form. Zhang read through the technical descriptions, marveling at how the system managed to generate such complex and game-like mechanics. Suddenly, the system issued a notification stating that his shadow had undergone a permanent and significant transformation. The interface explained that he could now exert full control over his shadow and merge with it to activate a special form. He narrowed his eyes in concentration, questioning if this transformation represented yet another hidden skill. The system confirmed that shadow form was now fully accessible and explained that training within this state would accelerate his growth. His aura would blend seamlessly into the darkness, rendering him nearly invisible to the naked eye. The system clarified that while he could manifest shadow form outside of the shadow realm, doing so would continuously drain his shadow points. The most shocking detail revealed that this form lacked fatal body parts, meaning decapitation would no longer result in immediate death. Zhang felt a surge of adrenaline, but he quickly discovered a cruel catch hidden within the fine print. If he suffered a lethal blow like decapitation, his health would not vanish, but it would drop instantly to 1%. He let out a frustrated scream, realizing that he had essentially traded a quick death for a delayed and agonizing one. Despite the obvious flaw, he acknowledged the utility of the skill and decided to test the manifestation immediately. Zhang raised a single finger, and the shadow beneath his feet mimicked the motion with perfect, eerie synchronization. He reached down to touch the dark silhouette, and the substance surged upward, wrapping around his body like a living cloak. The sensation felt entirely unfamiliar, yet it sparked a deep, primal fascination within his mind. He let out a sharp sigh and surged forward, dashing across the cramped apartment in the blink of an eye. The sheer force of his movement sent household objects flying through the air, clattering against the walls behind him. He realized with a jolt of excitement just how much his speed had increased since the previous day. Testing his newfound strength, he grabbed the heavy bed frame and hoisted it into the air as if it weighed nothing. To push his physical boundaries to the limit, he picked up a 100-kilo hammer and swung it directly into his own face. The heavy metal impacted his skin, but the force did absolutely nothing to his enchanted, shadow-infused physique. He laughed aloud in pure excitement, finally grasping the true scale of the power he now possessed. An angry voice from the apartment downstairs cut through his celebration, shouting for him to keep the noise down. Sensing the interruption, he retracted the shadow energy and allowed his body to return to its normal state. He opened the system window again and noticed an intriguing pulsing option that required manual activation. He tapped the screen, wondering what this hidden choice might mean for his future development. The description explained that he had only acquired partial authority over his class and had not yet fully awakened its potential. Once activated, this would become a class-exclusive ability, ensuring that no other hunter in the world could ever replicate it. However, the text also warned of significant risks involved in the activation process. Jiang hesitated as the word risk appeared in a menacing, bright red font, forcing him to reconsider his haste. A second message appeared, reminding him that the greatest opportunities were often hidden behind the highest risks. After a long moment of intense contemplation, he pressed the confirmation button and selected yes. Black, viscous matter erupted from the system window like ink in water, rushing toward him with terrifying speed. His expression shifted from confident curiosity to genuine panic as the substance began to coil around his limbs. Before he could mount any defense, the dark matter engulfed him completely, weaving a tight, suffocating cocoon around his frame. A nearby medicine bottle slipped from his trembling grasp, shattering against the floorboards with a sharp, echoing crash. The lights in the apartment flickered violently as a single drop of liquid medicine landed amidst the encroaching black sludge. The system displayed a final, chilling message, officially declaring his status as a hunter. A new notification warned that if he failed to excel in the art of the hunt, he would certainly perish within it. He was a born hunter, and the system promised that his future attacks would deal significantly higher damage to his prey. Additional notes appeared in his vision, clarifying that ranged weapons like guns, bows, or chemical poisons would not benefit from this bonus. The second note reminded him that secrecy remained his most important tool, and his reputation as a killer would define his success. The third note was the most ominous, stating that even the gods themselves could not escape his reach. Jiang examined his own hands, his mind reeling as he processed the weight of the information he had just consumed. Another notification popped up, explaining that activating shadow form significantly enhanced his inherent killing potential. He would require far less blood to maintain his strength, and he would gain the ability to execute instant decapitations on weakened foes. When an opponent's health dropped below a specific threshold, their health bar would turn crimson, revealing their fatal weak point. By striking that exact spot, he could trigger an execution sequence and eliminate the target in one clean motion. The system explained that the success rate of this execution depended on his blood level, raw strength, and the target's unique abilities. He recalled his recent battle in the shadow world and wondered if this was the very same skill that had activated during the fight. The thought lingered as he processed the vast implications of his newfound arsenal. With absolute damage and execution skills combined, he felt as though he had finally become invincible. Victory seemed like a certainty, and he raised his hand in a gesture of triumph, but a sudden doubt crept into his mind. He remembered the system's warning about the risks and quickly began to unwrap the bandages covering his body. He expected to see the raw, jagged wounds from his previous fight, but his skin appeared completely flawless. Confusion washed over him as he knew his injuries should have taken days or weeks to heal properly. The medicine he possessed, while effective, could never have facilitated such a rapid and miraculous recovery. A realization formed in his mind. His enhanced recovery must be directly linked to the power of his shadow form. The next day, one of Yao Yao's friends approached her, asking if the rumors about Jiang's fight were actually true. On the phone screen, Jiang's profile displayed a selfie with a caption claiming he had been struck 88 times during a brawl. The image clearly showed no injuries, causing the girls to whisper among themselves in disbelief. Yao Yao explained that Jiang had sent her a message claiming he encountered human traffickers while walking the streets. He had allegedly fought the criminals from one end of the road to the other while wielding only a kitchen knife. The friend, still staring at the phone, wondered if Jiang had been hurt and suggested they pay him a visit. Yao Yao listened quietly, her expression unreadable, before she shook her head in dismissal. She told them there was no need for concern, as Jiang had not been in any real fight. She claimed the only thing that happened to him yesterday was being chased by a stray dog. She suspected that he was simply trying to brag to everyone to look like a hero. The three of them eventually arrived at his front door, and she asked her friends to go inside and see for themselves. As she reached for the handle, her friends questioned how she managed to obtain a spare key to his apartment. She panicked for a brief second before claiming that Uncle Lee had given it to her for safekeeping. She opened the door, fully expecting to see him perfectly healthy, but she stopped in her tracks, shocked to find him sitting on the floor in obvious pain. She rushed over to his side, demanding to know why he had removed his bandages if he was still suffering. Jiang explained that he had removed them because he genuinely believed his wounds had already healed over the night. Her friends realized that he hadn't been bragging at all and had been telling the truth the entire time. They stared at his toned muscles, clearly impressed, and began to reach out to touch his arm. Yao Yao pushed both friends outside, demanding that they wait in the living room while she tended to him. The friends exchanged knowing looks, now fully convinced that Jiang and Yao Yao were secretly dating. Yao Yao began applying fresh medicine to his wounds, causing Jiang to twitch and hiss in sudden pain. She told him to stop his whining, claiming she was familiar with the medicine and knew it shouldn't hurt that much. Jiang ignored her words entirely, his eyes fixed intently on her legs while she worked. She noticed his wandering gaze and warned him that she would bring Xiaopeng in to apply the medicine instead. Jiang immediately rejected the idea, claiming the other man was far too clumsy for such a delicate task. She pinched his cheeks a little too hard, remarking that Uncle Lee had clearly been too lenient with his training lately. She asked him again what really happened the previous day, refusing to believe his absurd robbery story. He told her that he was a righteous man who simply liked to stand up for the cause of justice. His girlfriend, however, was not prepared to believe a single word of his heroic narrative. He wondered what he could possibly tell her, as mentioning the mutant in the shadow layer sounded far too insane to be true. He changed the subject by asking about her father, wondering if the man had returned home the previous evening. She told him that her father had not returned and asked why he was so curious about his schedule. Jiang looked down at the floor with a troubled expression, explaining that he felt the life of a night patrol officer was incredibly difficult. They were forced to work through the day and the night, facing constant danger that never seemed to end. Yao Yao sat in silence, absorbing his words as she continued to dress his wounds. He looked at her, thinking that she must be deeply worried about the safety of her father. Being a night patrol officer was far from a peaceful or safe profession for anyone. Uncle Lee had already lost an arm in the line of duty, and the young man he met in the shadow layer had died at only 20. Even someone as powerful as her father had suffered permanent damage, meaning he could never reach higher levels of strength. Yama finally looked at him and asked if he intended to join the night patrol after clearing his martial arts exam. He thought for a moment, revealing that he was still unsure about his future path. He jokingly asked if there would be any beautiful girls on the night patrol, which immediately made her grow annoyed. Meanwhile, the two friends tried to eavesdrop on the conversation from the living room, whispering about what was happening inside. The two of them finally walked back into the room, curious about the state of their conversation. Jiang asked them how they got back in, and they replied that they just wanted to check on his recovery. He told them not to worry, and gestured for everyone to sit down and relax. As they settled in, Jiang started yapping again, spinning yet another elaborate and made-up story about his life. His girlfriend rolled her eyes, convinced that he was just showing off for the benefit of her friends. She told him she was heading to the supermarket and asked if she should throw away his torn, bloody clothes. Without even looking at her, he told her to toss them away and continued his story without missing a beat. Suddenly his eyes widened and he realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. He leapt toward Yao Yao, frantically telling her to wait and stop what she was doing. He shouted that he had something extremely important hidden inside the pockets of his discarded clothes. In an anticlimactic manner, a single, mysterious item tumbled out of the fabric as he lunged to stop her. A small, innocuous bag of sanitary pads tumbled out from the folds of his shirt, hitting the floor with a soft thud. The stunned girl stared at the item with a look of pure confusion, demanding to know why he carried such things. The nervous young man scratched his head, stammering that he bought them at the supermarket yesterday because she had complained of a stomachache. One of the observant friends whipped out a phone to capture the moment, planning to share the embarrassing spectacle with their entire class. The young man held the bag out toward her, kindly asking if there was anything else he could provide to help her feel better. She snatched the bag from him and threw it back with genuine fury, insisting that she did not need any of his help. He stood there in utter confusion, wondering why she had suddenly become so aggressive over a simple gesture of concern. The two friends exchanged knowing glances, convinced this was just another typical lover's spat, and decided it was time to leave the pair alone. Once the apartment finally fell silent, the young man felt free to test the limits of his hidden potential. He commanded his own shadow to merge with his physical form, preparing to begin a rigorous and unusual exercise routine. A dark, viscous substance enveloped his body, pulling him into the mysterious and dangerous dimension known as the Shadow Realm. Despite the thick pollution choking the air, he felt remarkably comfortable, finding the atmosphere as refreshing as a vast, open plain. His body sat at 60% health, yet he noticed with relief that his lingering pain had completely vanished and his vitality was rapidly regenerating. A bright, pulsating current surged through his veins as he prepared his body for the grueling physical training ahead. He felt as though his muscles possessed an endless supply of strength, ready to push past any previous human limits. With fluid, rapid movements, he began dropping into hundreds of push-ups, his form perfect despite the encroaching shadows. The system pinged in his mind, notifying him that his dark form had successfully entered the dense shadow layer. He began accumulating shadow points for every repetition, feeling his raw strength increase with every ounce of effort he exerted. His body grew more powerful with each push-up, the physical strain fueling his rapid evolution within this strange, dark world. After hitting the 1,000 mark, he stood up and decided to venture back toward the threshold of the outside world. The familiar streets of the real world appeared eerily empty, devoid of the usual hustle and bustle of city life. He mused to himself that if he possessed this level of power in the real world, he would surely command a massive army of disciples. He found a sturdy bar and began performing intense one-armed exercises, testing his grip strength against the cold steel. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the night patrol, the atmosphere grew heavy as an important strategic meeting began to commence. Executive Liu sat at the head of the table while a subordinate presented a grim report regarding recent fluctuations in the darkness. The analyst informed him that the range of these fluctuations was exceptionally wide and the oscillations had become increasingly abnormal. Pollution levels had spiked, spreading across a much larger geographic area than they had ever recorded in the past. Various squads had identified similar, terrifying cracks in the fabric of reality, appearing in multiple different regions. A young woman continued the presentation, noting that the fluctuations were now concentrated heavily within densely populated residential areas. This was a troubling development, as these disturbances had previously been distributed randomly across the map. The report indicated that unusual, dangerous activities had become far more frequent over the past few days. 4 distinct abnormal incidents had occurred where innocent civilians were dragged into the shadow layer and lost to the dark side. Such occurrences were historically rare, yet no one could determine if the frequency would continue to escalate in the future. Abyssal fissures proved far more dangerous than the minor disturbances caused by the standard shadow layer. If one compared the creatures of the shadow layer to ferocious wild beasts, the abyssal fissures were a different category entirely, capable of spawning something as destructive as a titan. Suddenly, Uncle Lee interrupted the tense silence, commenting that these reports were merely suspicions and there was no reason for the team to panic. He reminded the room that they had been training and preparing for combat for a long time, so they should remain composed. Everyone at the table, including Executive Liu, shot him a sharp glare, forcing him to tell them to carry on with the rest of the report. The presentation shifted to a somber list of night guards who had tragically lost their lives in the line of duty during recent weeks. Once the meeting concluded, Liu stood before a large glass window, gazing out at the flickering city lights. He reached into his pocket for a cigarette, wondering aloud why these strange, unusual activities always seemed to peak around the new year. He searched for a lighter, but as he reached for a flame, he realized his daughter had swapped his cigarettes for cookies yet again. Suddenly, a pack of cigarettes flew through the air toward him, which he caught effortlessly with his hand. It was Lee, who stood nearby and told the executive that he really should stop wearing such a stern, worried face. Lee offered him a light, but Liu refused the smoke, claiming he had no desire to develop lung cancer. Lee mocked him for being afraid, but the executive demanded that he speak up if he had stayed behind just to ask a specific question. Lee informed him that yet another urgent notice had been issued from the authorities above. Liu inquired about the nature of the notice, his face turning tense and pale as he anticipated the coming news. After hearing the details of the notification, the executive appeared deeply shaken, his composure slipping for the first time that day. He asked Lee if the information had been officially confirmed by the high command. Lee told him that he should have already received the same alert on his own terminal. He turned on his computer, the screen glowing with the official seal of the Night Patrol Bureau. Lee asked if he had finally decided which academic path his daughter would take in the coming year. He wondered if she would choose to specialize in extraordinary supernatural sciences or, perhaps, study the humanities. Lou replied that he had not yet made a final decision, preferring to wait until the results of the upcoming abilities test. The emergency notification stated that all candidates with a second-grade ranking or higher in the supernatural category must select a specialized field of study. The executive asked Lee about the progress of the young man named Jiang. He added that he did not trust Jiang, as he did not believe the boy was an entirely honest person. He wondered aloud what category of supernatural studies the boy would choose for his mandatory major. Lee replied that the boy would not take any of the supernatural courses at all. The executive looked surprised, asking if he planned on forcing the boy to specialize in extraordinary human sciences instead. Lee told him that he wanted the boy to take a standard curriculum focused on regular human sciences. Lou thought he was joking, noting that Jiang had not even taken his official abilities test yet. He reminded Lee that once the boy passed the test, he would be forced to major in the exceptional human sciences by the Bureau. Lee stood up and calmly revealed that he did not want the boy to take the test in the first place. He walked out for a stroll, leaving the executive alone to deal with the heavy burden of his official duties. A moment later, a girl with pink hair entered the office carrying a massive stack of files. She apologized for the disturbance, but Lou did not seem bothered, asking her what had brought her to his office at such a late hour. She displayed a notification that had been transmitted directly from the shadow layer. The report described a new type of strange creature that had recently been sighted. It was a respectful shadow entity that spent its time exercising with intense, human-like discipline. The creature was pitch black and resembled a human shadow, yet it possessed a distinct and peculiar personality. The documentation stated it was first seen in the garden of the Xinyu Residential Center, likely having accidentally invaded that specific area. It showed a keen interest in physical exercise and even utilized human tools for its training regimen. The report emphasized that the creature displayed an incredibly low aggressive tendency toward those who discovered it. It even offered a polite greeting when approached by curious explorers or scouts. The official risk assessment for the shadow was marked as low, and it currently held no record of killing any humans. The pink-haired secretary informed the executive that the monitoring team had discovered this peculiar being near the residential zone. Because there were no records of such a creature in their database, she requested the executive's professional opinion on how to proceed. Lou looked at the file, admitting he had never seen such a creature in all his years of service. The scene shifted back to the shadow layer, where Jiang was busy filming a giant spider with his mobile device. He spoke to his invisible audience, explaining that the spider meat actually contained more protein than an equivalent serving of rice. He went on to claim that the spider meat was remarkably tender and delicious if prepared correctly. He told his viewers that anyone could easily grill the surface of the meat using a simple heat source. He took a bite, noting that it did not taste like beef or lamb, but possessed a unique flavor profile that could only be described as spider meat. He posted the video, momentarily regretting that he had not realized how interested the public was in snapshots of the shadow layer. Now that he knew his niche, he felt certain it would not be long before he became a viral sensation on the internet. After posting the clip, he discovered that a vast number of people were already creating content about their own exceptional abilities. This felt strange to him, as he had previously been told that posting such content online was strictly prohibited. Just then, he received a terrifying notification informing him that he had to go hunting immediately or he would face certain death. John grew frightened and frantically bashed the notification away, trying to clear his screen. He realized with growing anxiety that his remaining lifespan had been reduced to a mere 100 hours. He felt confused and overwhelmed, unable to understand why the system was imposing such a lethal deadline upon him. He remembered that opening his class abilities carried significant hidden risks that he had not fully anticipated. This was the dangerous price of awakening as an assassin, a path that demanded constant sacrifice. He composed himself, breathing deeply, and began to search for a viable way out of this desperate situation. The notification explained that as a hunter, he had to continue his cycle of killing if he wanted to extend his life. He realized that he could remain mortal for longer if he simply kept hunting, effectively buying time with the lives of others. The text also mentioned that even if his physical body disappeared, another form of existence would remain in the void. He did not fully grasp the philosophical implications of that line, but he understood the urgency of his mission. He also puzzled over why the notification claimed he would be happy when he woke up in this desolate place. He decided that if he failed to kill a strange creature, he would have to seek assistance from Uncle Lee. He looked at the spider, realizing it was the first target he needed to eliminate to buy himself more time. He decided to capture the entire fight on camera, believing the footage would be the key to his future fame. He placed his phone at a perfect angle, ensuring it could record the entirety of the confrontation. He felt no fear of being caught, knowing his account was a secret channel provided to him by the Night Patrol Bureau. He merged with his shadow and began the stream, his heart pounding in anticipation of the battle. He possessed several monkey coins and intended to test their reliability during this high-stakes encounter. He greeted his followers with a confident tone, introducing himself while the live stream broadcasted his location. He told them he had encountered a strange, dangerous creature and was prepared to engage it. His followers flooded the chat with comments, excited to see him face off against the giant spider. He cautioned them to remain silent, then began to approach the sleeping beast with the grace of a predator. He remained completely still, his movements muffled by his shadow form as he crept toward the monster. He drew the heavy iron stick he had purchased for a hefty sum, feeling the weight balance perfectly in his hand. The spider finally stirred, but it failed to notice Jiang due to his perfect concealment in the shadow form. He prepared his execution skill, focusing his eyes on the creature to identify a fatal weak point. He finally spotted the vulnerability and steeled his resolve, deciding to finish the creature in a single strike. The scene shifted back to 30 minutes earlier, when the spider had first arrived in this world, shivering with excitement. It loved the environment of this new world, finding the air sweet and free of the crushing pressure found in the abyss. There were no other dangerous predators around to threaten its existence in this peaceful garden. The spider considered itself a weak creature, merely hoping to survive in this strange, quiet land. The injured spider retreated into the darkness, hoping to find a quiet corner where it could sleep and recover its strength. It felt a phantom presence nearby, but whenever it turned to look, there was nothing but empty air and shifting shadows. Deciding the area had become compromised, the monster crawled toward a different spot to hide from the invisible threat. Suddenly, a heavy iron rod slammed into its side, and the hunter felt a surge of dark energy flowing into his own body. He realized that striking specific pressure points on the creature allowed him to extract power more efficiently than a standard blow. The spider had already lost a significant amount of blood, and its health bar dropped to a mere 40%. As the hunter prepared to strike again, the spider lashed out with a desperate claw, but the blow failed to connect with anything solid. The young man felt no pain at all, marveling at how his shadow form rendered him untouchable to the beast. He unleashed his shadow attack skill, watching in fascination as his silhouette slipped through the darkness like a master thief. He realized that direct confrontation was unnecessary when he could simply wait for the perfect opening to end the fight. Elsewhere, a young girl scrolled through her phone, watching a live broadcast of a man in a uniform patrolling the city streets. She swiped past a green-haired girl visiting a small restaurant and a blogger who treated her lighter like a sacred family heirloom. The white-haired observer grew bored with the repetitive content, sighing as she searched for something that actually held her interest. Her eyes widened when a news stream popped up, showing a boy named Yu broadcasting from the northern capital. On the screen, strange monsters leaped across rooftops, and the girl sat up in bed, wondering if the footage was real or merely a clever special effect. Yu pointed toward the camera and introduced the shadow spider as an ancient ghost, the weakest rank of the other creatures. The chat exploded with comments, with some viewers praising his handsome appearance and others venting about their own trivial daily struggles. Yu ignored the noise, warning his audience that the shackles on the spider made sounds that no ordinary human should ever hear. The white-haired girl frowned at the rude comments in the chat, feeling a surge of annoyance at the behavior of the anonymous internet users. She paused the video for a second, her fingers flying across the screen as she typed a message of her own. Yu vanished into the darkness, his body dissolving into shadows, leaving the audience in complete shock. The girl smiled, realizing that this mysterious streamer was far more capable than the average person. Yu reappeared behind the spider and hurled his metal rod, forcing the creature to roar in agony as it rose on its hind legs. A beam of crimson light erupted from the ground, piercing the monster and causing it to stumble in confusion. Yu stepped forward to taunt the beast, grinning as he told the creature that he was standing right behind it. The spider lunged with all 8 legs, but the hunter dodged every strike with fluid, effortless grace. Watching from under her blanket, the white-haired girl cheered for him, mesmerized by his incredible speed and confidence. The spider suddenly spewed a wave of acid, coating the ground in a bubbling purple liquid that hissed with intense heat. The monster laughed, believing it had finally trapped the human, but Yu's voice drifted down from the rooftops above. He asked the beast if it truly thought he was helpless just because the floor was covered in toxic sludge. Yu stepped off the edge of the building, declaring that no place in this world was ever truly devoid of shadow. He phased through the walls of the nearby structures, ignoring the acid as he closed the distance to his prey. He announced his name to the world, stating that endless cycles of killing had erased his memories of everything else. He drove his iron rod deep into the spider's skull, bringing the creature to its final, wheezing end. Placing his palm against the carcass, Yu activated his shadow-swallowing skill to drink the remaining darkness from the monster. Black energy surged into his frame, weaving itself into a flowing white cloak that shimmered with a supernatural glow. The viewers were left stunned, many of them feeling as though they were watching a high-budget superhero movie unfold in real time. The white-haired girl pressed her phone against her chest, her heart racing with an excitement she had not felt in years. She navigated to his profile, noting that the user known as the Killer Yu had already amassed over 700,000 likes. Driven by a sudden impulse, she pressed the follow button and sent a private message asking to sponsor his next assassination mission. The system analyzed the corpse, identifying it as a first-level middle-rank creature that carried a high degree of ancient demon pollution. Yu felt a sting of disappointment, as he had expected a monster of this rank to offer more of a challenge. He checked his mobile device, noticing that his live stream had reached over 1.5 million concurrent viewers. He chuckled, deciding to end the broadcast while the audience was still desperate for more information. As he moved, a black thread wrapped around his arm, and he realized he had gained the Shadow Net ability. He fired the thread at a nearby building, feeling a jolt of exhilaration as he was hoisted into the air. His joy was short-lived, however, as he miscalculated the trajectory and crashed headfirst into a brick wall. He slumped onto a street lamp, groaning as he realized that he still had a lot of practice to do before he could master this power. A notification flickered in his vision, informing him that his lifespan had increased by only 3 days, leaving him with a total of 7. He frowned at the small return on his effort, knowing that finding more creatures would be a difficult task. A third system message appeared, reminding him that a hunter had to remain hidden in the shadows to build a reputation. The system explained that as his fame grew, he would unlock new abilities and gain the power to mark specific targets. He could now track enemies based on their fear, though the mark lasted for only 1 second at his current level. He learned that hunting marked targets would grant him extra agility and strength, but failing to kill them quickly would be a wasted opportunity. Yu rubbed the back of his head, trying to process the complex rules of his new, lethal existence. He wondered if the sudden influx of fame was the key to unlocking his true potential as a hunter. He decided that if he kept hunting and streaming, he could improve his strength while gaining the resources he desperately needed. A red mark suddenly flared in his vision, and he looked around to find a massive purple monster lurking behind a nearby building. His grin widened into an unhinged expression, his eyes burning with the thrill of the hunt. He leapt from the street lamp, landing on the pavement with the intent to claim his next trophy. The scene cut to an apartment where Yu was suddenly struck hard across the face by an angry young woman. Yao Yao stood over him, demanding to know what kind of dangerous activities he had been involved in during his absence. She pulled out a disinfectant pad and began cleaning the blood from his cheek with a stern expression. Yu tried to explain that he was destined to be a hero, but she silenced him with a sharp look. She asked him if he knew of any hero who returned home covered in fresh wounds every single day. She stuffed a piece of cotton into his nose to stop the bleeding, warning him that he was only getting himself killed. Yu clenched his teeth in frustration, feeling the weight of her concern, but refusing to back down from his path. He turned away from her, whispering that he possessed the power to heal his own injuries with the shadows. Yu clarified that he had not activated his shadow form simply so she could assist him. The young woman's expression shifted to one of intense curiosity as she asked him to explain his vague statement. Attempting to steer the conversation away from his secret, he grabbed a water bottle and suggested they watch a film instead. She replied with a shrug, noting that there was very little of interest currently playing on the screens. As she scrolled through movie titles on her phone, she mentioned that a specific YouTuber had recently captured the public's attention. Her face turned a deep shade of red, a clear sign of her growing embarrassment as she brought up the popular internet personality. Noticing her strange reaction, the young hunter asked her for more details about this mysterious creator. Without offering a direct answer, she held up her phone and urged him to look at the glowing screen. To his absolute shock, he saw his own shadow introducing itself as Yu, a mysterious assassin who had lost his memories. The sight left him completely speechless, causing him to choke on his water and descend into a fit of coughing. Concerned by his reaction, she asked if he was all right, genuinely wondering if he was truly that surprised by the viral content. Trying to compose himself, he hastily reassured her that nothing was wrong before hesitantly asking if she had been watching the channel. She enthusiastically confirmed his suspicion, revealing that she had been following the mysterious figure for 2 days already. She noted that the blogger had quickly become the most popular and unusual figure currently active on the internet. Feeling a wave of unease, he scratched the back of his head and asked if that assessment was truly accurate. While the idea of fame sounded exciting, he secretly wondered if publicly posting such dangerous content would eventually lead to legal trouble. Realizing how rapidly he had gained attention, he began to worry that the night patrol might finally catch him in the act. Noticing his visible nervousness, she advised him to keep his mouth shut regarding anything he knew about the blogger. She assured him that his current situation did not have much of an impact on public perception, so he should remain calm. Instead, she suggested that he watch a real fight against some mutants to take his mind off his worries. She grabbed his hand and moved closer, excitedly asking if he truly thought the mysterious blogger was cool. She insisted that he should take inspiration from the man in the video if he wanted to make something of himself. Feeling deeply embarrassed, he remained silent, his gaze fixed firmly on the glowing phone screen. She continued her insistence, explaining that another popular blogger had already started analyzing his recorded footage. Seeing her genuine excitement, he allowed a small, tired smile to tug at the corners of his mouth. Then, out of nowhere, she turned to him and asked if he thought she could become famous as well. He avoided her searching gaze and jokingly asked if she wanted to record herself wearing a school uniform outside and dancing in the shadow layer. She told him to get lost, retorting that she could simply record videos explaining the nature of the supernatural. Hearing this, he asked her if she really believed she could compete with experienced Night Patrol seniors just by reading information. He added that if she stepped outside in such an outfit, she would easily be tracked by dangerous stalkers. At this, she frowned and shot him a menacing look that made him shrink back into the sofa. He pointed at her and remarked that he had lost the argument, though his words only confused her further. Before he could offer an explanation, she suddenly appeared behind him, pressing the cold muzzle of a gun against his back. Sternly, she asked if he had been injured while stalking someone, her voice dripping with genuine suspicion. Startled by the sudden weapon, he raised his hands in surrender and desperately insisted that he was only joking. Unconvinced by his pleas, she pushed him with the barrel of the gun and angrily demanded to know how she could be sure he was telling the truth. He tried to defuse the tense situation, addressing her as an officer and pleading for a short break. However, she firmly refused his request, ordering him to get up and prepare some food immediately. Exhausted by the confrontation, he collapsed onto the sofa and opened his personal messages the moment she left the room. Finally, she was gone, and he allowed his body to relax against the cushions. Just as he found a moment of peace, something on his feed caught his wandering attention. He noticed a massive flood of new messages from strangers asking who he was and why his videos were being posted. Some questioned if he was connected to the Night Patrol or if everything he did was merely staged for views. Others wanted to know if there were more pictures available or if the footage had been heavily edited. Amidst the chaos of the messages, he noticed several users mentioning a guy named Real Deal who had just exposed him. This revelation piqued his curiosity, and he navigated his browser over to the rival channel. He clicked on the link and saw an elderly man broadcasting a live stream to his audience. The man greeted his viewers and announced that they were not exploring shops today, but were instead dealing with a common scammer. The old man asked his audience if they had seen the video and if it looked genuine to them. He told them that they would watch the video first and then analyze it frame by frame on a computer. It was the same video of the young man fighting the spider in the abandoned district. The old blogger paused the video at a specific frame and asked the audience if they noticed the discontinuity between the two segments. He claimed this was definitive proof that the video had been doctored. He pointed to the background, mentioning that it had been digitally altered to cover up the unrealistic parts of the fight. The young hunter was confused, as this man was supposed to be a food blogger who reviewed different restaurants. He wondered why this stranger was trying to leech off his growing popularity. He had only cut out a few embarrassing scenes from the raw footage, and now he was getting criticized for it. The old man explained his reasoning for the review, turning his phone around to display an authentic tag on his profile. He claimed that he was a member of the Night Patrol and had once killed countless monsters in his prime. He boasted that because of his past experience, he could spot a fake video instantly. However, the discussion in the comments soon moved on to other, more heated topics. The young man pressed the comment button on his phone and saw users flooding the chat with contradictory messages. Some doubted that the footage was fake, questioning how something as complex as the shadow layer could be fabricated. Others wondered why the video would need editing if the events were truly real. They asked if the entire story had been false from the very beginning. Some commenters refused to call the video fake outright, while others pointed out issues with the physics of certain objects. One commenter expressed that they trusted the Night Patrol's word more than a random internet video. The young hunter smirked, thinking that they were all fools who failed to understand the reality of his power. However, he believed that one day they would eventually learn the truth. Standing up from the sofa, he stretched his aching limbs and remarked that if the video was indeed fake, then it was time to start hunting others. But before that, he needed to teach the old blogger a painful lesson. He decided to move back into the shadow layer and brainstormed all the titles he could add to his new video. After getting transported to the shadow realm, he took out a mini camera and attached it to his jacket. He noted that the number of creatures seemed lower than it had been on the previous day. The shadow layer, it seemed, reset itself from time to keep the balance. Suddenly, something caught his attention, and he asked himself what was happening in the distance. He sensed a level 6 creature lurking in the dark, waiting to ambush other mutants. Gripping his club in his hands, he grinned and prepared to see what a monster of the 6th rank was capable of. The hunt had officially begun. Taking a step to the side, he stood at the edge of a rooftop, but suddenly stopped his advance. Letting out a small sigh, he trembled slightly before deciding to descend the stairs, reminding himself to stay calm and avoid any sudden movements. A powerful killer like him was not meant to rush headlong into danger. He was a special kind of hunter, one who valued precision over raw power. As he climbed down the stairs, the creature he had spotted earlier emerged from the walls, letting out a loud, guttural roar. He paused and put a mark on the target, causing a glowing magic circle to appear in front of the beast. The monster immediately became wary of the strange marking. Observing this, he felt that everything was going according to his carefully laid plan. The marked target was supposed to experience a deep, inexplicable fear that would cloud its judgment. He noticed that the monster bore a striking resemblance to another creature he had encountered before, one equipped with deadly blades. He wondered if the monster had evolved since their last meeting. He then whispered that it did not matter, since the same kind of transformation had happened to him as well. Without hesitation, he used the 6th staff technique, wielding his blade before striking the monster directly in the stomach. The creature's health bar dropped to 45%, which immediately put him on high alert. Taking a step back, he leapt high into the air and initiated the hunt. The system promptly reported that the mark and hunt ability had been activated, temporarily increasing his strength and agility. The duration was only 1 second, and if he killed the target within this period, he would gain additional rewards. He swung his weapon at the monster once again, but it dodged the attack and he ended up hitting the building behind it. A bright light illuminated the surroundings as his strike connected with the concrete. He looked back in surprise to see the monster completely unharmed by his desperate blow. Shocked, he pushed off the building's wall and continued his pursuit. Finally, he landed directly in front of the creature, which let out an eerie screech and flailed its appendages in different directions to intimidate him. He hesitated for a moment before the monster suddenly opened its mouth and emitted a strange, vibrating sound. The young hunter's head started to feel dizzy, and he wondered if the mutant was launching mental attacks on him. The monster suddenly slashed at him, and he failed to block the incoming attack. He cleared his throat, landed nearby, and looked down at his hands, realizing that the monster was far more powerful than he anticipated. He noted that his own health bar had dropped to less than 66%, as he had already lost 34% in a single attack. As the monster charged at him again, he quickly understood that its physical strikes were incredibly strong and that he needed a new strategy. The mutant tried to hit him, but he started dodging all of its attacks and even began to taunt it. The battle between them intensified, filling the area with loud, echoing sounds of combat. The monster continued advancing, and suddenly it stopped right in front of him. It extended strange appendages from its mouth, but the young hunter was nowhere to be seen. As the monster searched for him in confusion, our boy took advantage of the momentary lapse. He rushed forward and called the creature a fool for falling for his simple trick. He thought to himself that despite the creature's evolution, its combat patterns had not changed. This was still his territory, and today, the monster would not gain the upper hand. With that thought, he launched a series of powerful attacks, striking the creature multiple times in quick succession. The monster roared in pain, but he remained unfazed by the noise. He gave it no chance to recover and continued his relentless offense. Slowly, his punches started cracking the mutant's face. He jumped backward, preparing for the final strike. The young hunter lunges into the air, but he freezes mid-strike as his eyes lock onto the creature's face. He stares in disbelief at the mutant, recognizing the unmistakable features of the missing night patrolman. The realization that the man he once knew has been twisted into this grotesque form leaves him momentarily paralyzed. A deafening growl erupts from the monster, snapping the young hunter out of his daze and forcing him to retreat. The creature turns its back on him and flees into the darkness with surprising speed. Instinctively, the young hunter cries out for the beast to stop, desperately insisting that he only wants to talk. He pursues the creature through the shadows until his lungs burn and he is forced to slow to a gasping halt. His mind races as he attempts to process the tragic transformation he just witnessed. The system's cold, mechanical voice echoes in his mind, confirming that he has successfully tracked his prey. A new notification flickers into his vision, informing him that the hunt was nearly successful but ultimately failed as the target escaped. The system warns him with chilling indifference that repeated failures will inevitably weaken his body and shorten his lifespan. He knows deep down that constant hunting is his only path to true strength. He believes that only through this endless cycle will he gain the authority to transcend death itself. Yet, in the quiet aftermath of the chase, he finds himself questioning the true meaning of his existence. He wonders if his life is destined to be nothing more than a series of hunts, or if there is a greater purpose waiting to be discovered. The system ignores his existential crisis, repeating its grim reminder about the inevitability of death and the necessity of constant preparation. The relentless warnings begin to grate on his nerves, filling him with a sudden, sharp frustration. He slams his fist into the glowing system interface, demanding that the voices in his head finally fall silent. His irritation spikes as the system continues to drone on, unbothered by his outburst. He loses his composure entirely, shouting into the empty street for the interface to stop its torment. His thoughts drift toward the legends of heroes who sacrifice their lives for the sake of others. He questions whether those noble souls eventually end up as broken, hollow shells like the creatures he now hunts. Lowering his hand, he catches his own reflection in a nearby window and wonders if death would turn him into a monster as well. Magical energy suddenly surges around his body, bathing him in an otherworldly, shimmering glow. He clenches his fist, making a firm, silent vow that there is no turning back from this path. He recognizes that he must continue the hunt, no matter the personal cost. He arrives at the Cloud Sea Gathering Place located in the East Zone, a known hotspot for supernatural activity. Glancing at his phone, he shifts his gaze toward the dark, ominous sky. He recalls news reports stating that anomalies frequently congregate in this specific area, so he feels no need for further caution. Shadowy blue sparks and dark energy swirl around his frame as he prepares to enter the fray. A black hole tears open above a nearby building, and he steps through it, instantly reappearing on the rooftop. He scans his surroundings, realizing the number of anomalies lurking in the area is far greater than he had anticipated. He notices, however, that these creatures lack the courage to step outside the safety of the buildings. A sharp sound catches his attention, drawing his eyes toward a creature glowing with a vibrant purple hue on the opposite roof. He observes the monster carefully, determining that it possesses immense strength despite its current state. He notes that its leg is badly wounded, causing its health bar to drop significantly. Seeing a clear opportunity, he steels his resolve and tells himself that he will not back down. He steps out from the shadows, creeping closer to the unsuspecting monster. The creature senses his presence immediately and retaliates by launching a barrage of magical energy orbs in his direction. Before the projectiles can make contact, he vanishes into thin air and reappears within a thick cloud of dust. He realizes that the monsters in this zone are far more alert than the ones he encountered in his own territory. This particular beast seems especially sensitive to the slightest movement in its environment. He watches as the red spots on its body slowly fade, indicating it is regaining its composure. He briefly wonders if this is due to its heightened awareness, but he quickly dismisses the thought as a distraction. He tells himself that he needs to find a clever way to keep the creature occupied. As the monster shifts its position, he senses a fleeting opening in its defenses. He focuses his gaze and activates his ability, marking the monster as his primary target for the kill. A glowing magic circle manifests around his eye as he watches the creature with growing intensity. Meanwhile, back at home, Yao Yao prepares dinner with her back turned to the doorway. The door swings open, and assuming it is the young hunter, she scolds him for being late without even turning around. She spins to face the newcomer, only to be startled by the sight of her father and Uncle Lee standing in the house. Her uncle fixes her with a sharp look and asks if she is cooking for the young hunter again. Her father sighs, remarking that it seems he has spent his life raising a daughter for someone else's family. Yao Yao grins and dismisses his complaints as complete nonsense. She asks why they have returned home so early in the evening. Her father explains that work at the office finished ahead of schedule, so they decided to head back. He mentions that since they rarely get to eat together, they are considering heading out to a restaurant for a meal. Yao Yao tells them there is no need to leave because she is already nearly finished with the cooking. Her father scratches his head in confusion, and her uncle suggests they skip the restaurant and enjoy the home-cooked meal instead. He then turns to her and asks for the whereabouts of the young hunter. She replies that she does not know, suggesting he may have gone out to play. Just as her uncle begins to complain about the young man's lack of responsibility, the front door bursts open. The young hunter shouts that he is starving and cannot wait to eat the dinner she prepared. He kicks off his sneakers at the entrance and asks what is on the menu, commenting that the smell is incredible. In a cheerful mood, he announces that he bought her favorite candy, but claims he was bitten by a big dog on the way. Uncle Lee grabs his head in frustration, and the room falls into a heavy, awkward silence as everyone stares at the boy. He freezes when he finally realizes that the entire family is home and watching him. He quickly stuffs the lollipop back into his pocket and makes an excuse about being chased by a dog. Uncle Lee raises a hand, deciding that since it is rare for them all to have time together, there is no need to ruin the mood. He invites everyone to sit at the table to begin the meal. As the young hunter takes his seat, his uncle pats him on the shoulder and tells him that it is okay to fight since he is still young. Uncle Lou pours a glass of liquor and casually remarks that he sees nothing wrong with a young man showing off for the girl he likes. He mentions that he saw him walking with a girl earlier and asks for her name. Yao Yao quickly interjects, stating that the girl's name is Yu Jo-er. Her father nods in agreement, saying she is quite good-looking, bright, and possesses a nice figure. He muses that if he were younger, he would have done anything to date a girl like her. He raises his glass, suggesting a toast to the young man's romantic prospects. The young hunter feels uneasy, wondering how his uncle can say such things directly in front of Yao Yao. She turns bright red but agrees to the toast anyway. His father notices him sitting still and tells him to raise his glass. The young hunter looks at Uncle Lou with a forced smile and downs the drink in one gulp. Uncle Lou grins, deciding to let the boy show off for a little while longer. The young hunter urges them to start eating, claiming he is out all day and rarely gets to enjoy home-cooked meals. Uncle Lou chuckles, agreeing that this is a rare and welcome opportunity. He comments that since Yao Yao cooks so often, it is no surprise that her skills are top-notch. Suddenly, Uncle Lou looks at her with genuine surprise. He admits he does not believe she cooks often since he always has to order takeout when he visits her home. He realizes she must be putting a lot of effort into taking care of the young hunter, preparing a wide variety of dishes for him. The young hunter looks at his uncle with a smirk, feeling that he has won this particular round of banter. As they continue eating, they raise several more toasts to one another in the warm atmosphere. After the meal, Yao Yao and her father prepare to head out. Near the door, the young hunter wishes them a safe trip. His uncle exchanges farewells with Uncle Lu, who grins at Yao Yao as she waves goodbye. As the door closes behind them, the young hunter picks up a bottle and asks if his uncle is thirsty. He replies that he is not and sits down on the sofa to relax. The young hunter approaches him while drinking water, letting the droplets run down his face. Li sits silently, staring into the distance before suddenly revealing that he has a question for him. The young hunter is caught off guard and asks what is on his mind. His uncle looks at him with a serious expression and asks if he has awakened his hidden abilities. The question shocks the young hunter, and he stares at his uncle with his eyes wide open. He tries to play it off, acting confused and asking what his uncle means by awakening abilities. Uncle Li tells him that he has served in the night patrol for 20 years and can recognize the specific nature of his injuries at a single glance. He asks the young man to be honest about what actually happened to him. The young hunter sits back down and admits that the incident occurred half a month ago. His uncle then asks him how he managed to awaken his powers. The young hunter turns to Li with a smile and asks if he is being interrogated. Li, holding a cigarette in his hand, reassures the boy not to worry and simply encourages him to speak the truth. The young hunter appears thoughtful and admits that he does not fully understand the situation since the powers simply manifested on their own. Li questions whether the event truly occurred without any external trigger. He mentions that such spontaneous awakenings are extremely rare, happening only about once a year. The young hunter stretches out his hand and says that it might all be thanks to his natural talent. However, Li frowns and gives him a menacing look, making the young hunter feel deeply uneasy. Li mentions that there will be a test this year and that everyone is required to pass the mandatory martial arts exam. The young hunter acknowledges this and assures his uncle that he is ready for whatever comes next. Li reveals that both he and the girl are already aware of the young man's secret. The uncle expresses surprise that the girl knows as well, his brow furrowing in deep concern. He speaks of the mounting pressure on the night patrol unit as the number of casualties continues to rise. He offers the young hunter a back door, suggesting he skip the martial examination to pursue a regular college entrance exam instead. The young hunter asks what he means by such an offer, confused by his uncle's casual mention of skipping standard procedures. Li explains that the young man would have the choice to enroll in a variety of universities through his connections. He suggests that if the boy enjoys comics, he could easily join an art department or another suitable field. The young hunter realizes for the first time that his uncle possesses far more influence than he previously assumed. Stepping closer, he hesitantly asks if he can simply obtain the certificate without actually enrolling in any classes. Li suddenly slaps the young man and shouts in disbelief at the audacity of the request. He declares that the boy will attend the Winter Academy because the environment there is ideal for his safety. He promises that once the studies are complete, he will arrange a stable job to ensure a happy life with the girl. The young hunter holds his head in frustration, questioning why his life must be dictated by such rigid plans. He insists that he still wants to pursue the path of an extraordinary individual regardless of the risks. This declaration makes the uncle angrier as he shouts that the boy must obey his instructions for his own good. Li calms down after a moment and stands in front of him in a heavy, suffocating silence. The young hunter refuses to listen and threatens to report his uncle to the Night Patrol Bureau if he attempts to force a back door. Li wears a confused expression as he struggles to comprehend the boy's stubborn defiance. They stare at each other in tense silence until the uncle finally sighs and insists that he is not joking. He warns that the world of special individuals is far more dangerous than the boy can possibly imagine. He urges the young hunter to focus on his studies and leave the fighting to those who know the stakes. The young hunter remains firm, insisting that he is entirely serious about his desire to fight. He points out that danger surrounds them everywhere and that his uncle cannot protect them forever. A heavy silence fills the room once more before Li looks away and exhales a long, weary breath. He tells the boy that he will likely regret this decision once he truly understands the reality of the path he has chosen. He adds that if the young man changes his mind before his junior year, he can always reach out for help. The young hunter asks him not to get involved in any crooked paths in the future.